Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where, as you can tell from the title, I will be talking about Stray. If you're new here, this is a video diary. I'm not recreating anything in Stray or really anything of that ilk. I am literally someone who just records an Animal Crossing episode every day and talks about a different topic, and today's is Stray. I will warn you before I get into any spoilers. Stray is also not a game, I think, which is that heavily affected by spoilers, to be honest, so make of that what you will. Hello everyone, we're now in Fawnhallow. It's 4:03 PM on Saturday, November 2nd, 2024. So what are my overall thoughts on Stray? My overall thoughts are, I enjoyed it. I think it was a good time, it was a fun time. It's essentially, it's a very, how should I say, simplistic game in a sense. There's no like crazy mechanics or difficult challenges behind Stray. It's very pretty straightforward, I would say, with what you do, how you interact with things. There's not much to be taken for. I'm also using the Joy-Con drifty Joy-Cons if you're wondering why I'm so bad at controlling things right now. There's not much in the way of like deep mechanics if that's what you're looking for. So I'll say straight off the bat, if that's what you want for a game, I would not go to Stray. What Stray excels at though is its sort of like environments and the experience of exploration, and also its unique novelty, I suppose, of being a cat. I think it's best encapsulated by the idea that you are not really the main protagonist in the story. You're more like a sort of bystander who stumbled into the entire story, and you're actually more of like a vehicle for someone else's story. That's kind of what Stray is like. But yeah, on the whole, I enjoyed Stray. I feel like its core draw is the environment. So if you like seen a trailer for Stray and you've looked around the environment and you're like, hey, I'd fancy like playing a cat and sort of zipping around these places like that, Stray is probably your game. It's probably something that you can relax with. It's like very low stakes. Like it's very difficult to get a game over or die in Stray. Saying I did do it once, but you know, I feel like it was a bit of a robbed death. But it's very sort of relaxing. It's a game all about where it does its best with its sort of like movement, not quite its movement, but the idea behind its movement controls and the exploration of the world you're in. By the very unique nature of you playing as just a regular cat, no magical abilities, nothing special, nothing crazy. With you get surprisingly quite a unique perspective on the world. For one thing, you're very small and you can sort of dart around all these little places, like things which would usually be blocked off in a game. You can like slip through the bars and you can yourself actually find out where and how to get somewhere, because you can just easily do so. You're a cat. Cats are squishy. Cats are very acrobatic, athletic even. And there's also a very sort of fun nature of like a lot of the gameplay is tied around these sort of jumps, and the animations behind the cat behavior is great. In most cases, I would say it feels very on point to, I don't own a cat, but I've met people who have had cats before, and very much a sort of vibe with how they move and how things work. It feels very on brand for the cat, and the movement feels on point, and it is fun to basically, like, it's where it shines is when, this is rare for me in the game, the exploration kind of shines as like a highlight. It's really fun to sort of like jump up and down the different buildings, hop around as a cat to basically go to a high point and then find like what is like a very comfy spot for you to just like sleep in, or to take in the scenery, or to look at the environment around, to go talk to the countless NPCs about art in these like town areas and listen to like the odd things that they talk about as they go about their daily lives, to see the reaction of the computerized faces. Because the environments are amazing. It's got like this really sort of dystopian cyberpunk theme, which sort of blends in of a fantastic sort of dystopian apocalyptic setting, but it's never like bland. It still feels like a thriving city, like a thriving location a lot of the time. Even with these NPC like computer people sitting about the place, it still feels like a place that you want to explore. There's like bright lights about the place, or there's like dimly lit like cozy corners where you can find random things here and there. And the exploration is great. It's fun to go around, especially with your companion character B12, and slowly learn about them as they sort of understand these whatchamacallits. What do you call them? These memories that you can gain as they sort of slowly piece together parts of a civilization. You can answer some more unanswered questions about the world and what it's like. That's really fun, that sort of slow discovery progress of process. And being sort of like looking into all these little spaces and being like, wow, this looks really cool. The environment, as countless people have said, the environmental design goes crazy. It goes hard. If you like, just look up a trailer, and if you think that even slightly appeals to you aesthetically, you'll have a great time probably playing Stray and looking around all these different places. Mild spoiler warning territory. Actually, no, but it's not even like mild spoilers. Let's go into like all bets are off now. Anything can be spoiled, because I feel like I've said the main pieces I want to about Stray. If you're interested in trying it out by this point, you would have probably gone to try it out. Now, all bets are off. Anything can be spoiled, so just be warned of that. But yeah, my favorite area, I mean, there's a lot of different favorite areas. I really quite liked Midtown, I think, because it was one which felt really like a living city where people just sort of go about their daily business. I mean, there's a hat store, a clothing store, there's a like nightclub, there's a bar. It's got like all these sort of like grungy-esque elements which you'd expect from like a cyberpunk sort of game with like a dystopian undertones. But at the same time, you're playing as like a cat, a very cute, light-hearted cat who is basically not so far removed, but rather disjointed from the troubles of civilization. As long as the cat has food and water and is in a healthy condition, it's fine. It's going to survive. You know, I'm sure there's like a bit of a kayfabe here, like a bit of a suspend your disbelief as the cat sort of ends up becoming a vehicle to help save the world, quote, quote, in a protagonist style. But a lot of the time, and this is the main part I say, is that, as I said, you don't feel like the protagonist much. Because as you have a story as a cat, which I've called Thistle in my playthrough. Don't know what their name is. But you play as Thistle, just a cat going through, and you got separated from your cat friends, and your entire goal is basically just to get back up to where you were before and reunite with them. But there's this whole underlying story about the commentary of like human nature, and civilization, cooperation, I suppose, and destruction of a world and coming together, and, you know, sacrifices being made, underlying this dystopian civilization which the rest of the robot people, live in. And you're accompanied by a remnant of a human civilization, B12, who basically used to be a scientist before the outbreak happened, before all the humans died, and before the robots ended up becoming the race which end up mimicking humans from their learned behaviors. And really, if you look at it from a narrative perspective, this is B12's story. B12's story about going through, learning about all the different bits and pieces, and then their final gift from humanity is to give the robots freedom once again, essentially, by sacrificing themselves. And even though their memories will be lost, in some way, they still sort of carry on by the progenitors. Is that the right word? Define progenitors. A personal thing from which a person descends. Okay, the opposite of progenitor, descendant, I guess. By the descendants carrying on through the things that they've learned from human culture. It really is B12's story. And you, as the cat Thistle, just sort of are there as a vehicle for the story. Like, that's something which is discussed. Like, there's a really great video about it called, like, games where you are not the protagonist or something, which encapsulates it better. But it really is not narratively your story. And I find that interesting in some ways. Like, I find that's a unique perspective, and one which is befitting of you playing as just a generic household stray cat, right? It doesn't make sense for you to have this whole overarching, like, weight of the world is on your shoulders sort of story as a cat. Because you're just a cat. Do you care that much? And the answer is probably not. But at the same time, the robot has the story behind them. And it lends to some good things and some bad things. Well, a good thing is you can still have this overarching intense plot, I suppose, one which has some stakes to it. And it's fun to see B12 like slowly uncover their past and learn more about themselves and the story there within. But at the same time, it also has this weird disconnect of the fact that you, at the end of the day, are playing a cat. But the story tries to still hit these emotional beats as if you were playing like a human, character with the level of investment the human character would. Like, for example, I think the greatest illustrations at the end of B12's massive sacrifice, to basically being like, they are the last of humankind, and they are going to essentially destroy themselves so the robots can live out their lives, which is meant to be, if you are playing a human character, this really deep, emotional, impactful moment, right? It's your companion being sacrificed, but it's almost sort of like the stone-faced cat expression from it, where it's not like, it basically sort of tries to split the difference of two different ways of telling a story. One being like this very narrative, like human-focused story, where if you were playing a human NPC, you'd have this heartfelt conversation with deep acting, with voice actors and human expressions to be able to convey the story. And it also has, like, on the other side, it has this really environmental story. You know, things where indie games like Inside or Limbo do without any dialogue, or Journey, that's a great comparison, do tell a story with no dialogue whatsoever, with no need for words. The expression, the insinuation, people can fill in the gaps and understand the story on their own. And it does this very weird thing where it basically takes both things, where it takes that human story with B12, to be fair, no voice acting over top, it's just text boxes, which is, I would say, is more of a scope. There's more of a factor as an indie game, like they can't hire, they had to put their budget somewhere, and they chose environmental design, which, great choice, by the way. But they also combine it with a very sort of like indie cinematic way of telling stories with non-dialogue through the cat. But then it sort of like melds it together, which gives a really sort of awkward dissonance, I think, between the story, where if you interface with it from the human side perspective, the cat is just like stone-faced cold, and you can't really interact with it from a non-dialogue perspective, because the dialogue is told through text boxes. Like, it's not like you have to sort of sit there and read it, right? So I think it does its best, like, when the dialogue was over, when B12 actually, like, perishes, with the cat just curling up around B12, and slowly the loading bar sort of ticks up from 0 to 100. That is when I think it really worked, the storytelling aspect, when it committed to one side or the other. I'm not saying every game has to commit to one side or the other. I'm just saying that this mix personally didn't impact as much for me. And a lot of the times it kind of happens with some NPCs. They don't really sacrifice, but they sort of stay behind, and it sort of feels a bit anticlimactic in a way. Like, the goodbyes are just sort of like, oh, okay, you're staying, we're going forward to the next chapter, okay. So like all the outsiders do this, like when Momo is basically like, you go on ahead and then you just never see Momo again. It's like, okay, sure. And then the other outsider who is like part of the anthill, and it's like, okay. And then Clementine's like, you keep on going, I'm gonna distract them, we just need someone to make it to the outside, which in the moment it looks like she's talking to the cat. She's probably talking to B12, a robot, right? Because B12 is doing the conversing, but still feels like the emotional impact is sort of lessened, because of this weird sort of distance between the two. Well, the weird, I'm not saying it's dissonance in a way that it can never work, I'm just saying that this implementation didn't quite work. But other than that, Stray is a very, very straightforward game. I think it'd be completely fine to play if you're someone who doesn't play many games or doesn't interface with many other games. If you just want like a sort of atmospheric experience, Stray's got you covered. It's mostly just sort of like a walking exploration simulator. Well, it's got two modes. Like, one being like a sort of like puzzly element to it, where you're trying to like navigate this world and do these very, very simple jump puzzles, which is complete of you just like looking at a place and jumping to it, which sometimes it has a nice fluidity to it, but sometimes when you have to battle the camera, it feels very sort of stop-start. But then it also has these nice like exploration moments within cities, where you're like talking to all the NPCs and exploring and having a good time, like finding out and like doing these mini side quests. I will say, hot take, maybe there should be more exploration things in there. Like more things like the memories and badges to sort of like reward you for going out of your way to explore and climb about the place, because it feels like that's what the game wants you to do. It wants you to embrace this cat side nature of you and sort of just go about the place pushing stuff off, scratching things to really find things. So I feel like there could always be room for a little bit more, which is rare for me, because that's a very exploration focused mechanic, which I don't interface with much. But it breaks up these moments of like light-hearted exploration with some moments of intensity. The two main ones being, there's three main ones. One being like a chase sequence, which you have with the Zerks sometimes, where you sort of like run about the place and the Zerks are like following you. It's very, very simple. There's not much like difficulty when there, you just sort of sneak around. The second moment, which I didn't appreciate much at the time, was the stealth element, but mainly because I found it difficult to actually Like, I didn't realize there was like a whole different avenue I could have taken to actually stealth past things. So I just sort of like ended up running through, and I was like, this doesn't feel very stealthy. But at some moments it does work quite well, I think. But with stealth, where you're hiding from the sentinels in the factory and that sort of thing, it works pretty well actually upon retrospect and reflection. Just in the moment, because of unfortunate me being stupid and not finding the proper way that you're meant to interface with it, kind of felt like this feels a bit weird. And the third final way is like a sort of mixy puzzle thing where you have enemies like the Zerks, and either you're meant to destroy them with your light, which turns it into a bit more like an action sequence, or you have this puzzle element where you need to sort of like trap them essentially and walk off and do something, which work fine, I would say. I think the action sequence worked the best, and the stealth sequence do actually work pretty well as well. The puzzle ones are just sort of like give or take, you know. I think the movement puzzles kind of do it better, because this game isn't really defined by its high intensity moments, but I understand the need of them to break up break up what would be a monotony of just walking and simulation if you didn't have these high intense moments, right? Yeah. So it does it well. It does it like it's not particularly deep, these like escape moments. Like there's no deep mechanics within it. There's nothing where you go like, whoa, this is crazy hard or difficult. You just sort of do it and it's fine. But yeah, nothing else to say about that. The real focus, as I say, is the exploration, the mechanical exploration and looking about the place, because that's really quite fun. And there's this interesting sort of like underlying story going on with B12 and the nature of like how these robots got trapped here and the end of humanity and civilization, and what it means to carry on this sort of, or like how you can carry on a legacy, I suppose. There's also this very interesting moment of like this eldritch story here where you go into like places and there's a load of eyes and you're like, whoa, this is kind of like what the origin of the Zerks are. But then it's like never brought up again, essentially. Like it happens, not never brought up again. Like you have once you're past the Zerk moment of a story, they just never appear again. And there's nothing about it of like trying to cure this corruption or anything like that. It's more like they sort of just get away from it, or I guess that they open up the roof and the sunlight kind of destroys it all. But like I feel like probably is the best way I'd put it is that some of the story arcs feel like they don't have resolutions which feel satisfying in the end. They sort of feel almost a little bit empty. Like the actual ending itself, it's very sad how B12 in this moment of the thing opening up, and I feel like that should be like a very atmospheric ending story as you have the walk out to back onto the civilization, and it should be this very sort of atmospheric moment, but at the same time it's very almost hollow in a sense, where you don't feel it as much, because it's like you have a very nice moment with B12 and then it's sort of just like you see the cat at the end and then that's it. There is no resolution, there's no conclusion to it, which maybe, to be fair, an artistic choice. Maybe that's what they wanted and that's fair enough, but that doesn't take away from the fact it still feels a little bit I'm not sure. I would have liked to see just a little bit something more, you know, just to be like, oh yeah, you know, that felt like a resounding conclusion. Anywho, yeah. But all in all, I felt it was a pretty good game. Like I thoroughly enjoyed my time spent playing with it. I think some people said it's actually quite a short game. Like a lot of people played through 5 hours. I took like 8 hours, I think, for the main story, really, or main story and some extras. But to be fair, I did a lot of random like talking and exploration. So it kind of depends on how slowly you end up taking stories, is how much hours you get out of it. So I don't know, that cost benefit analysis you got to do up to yourself, but I feel like don't judge it by just hours alone. You got to judge it by how much you end up liking these sort of things as well, and like how much each of those hours are worth to you. So all in all, I would recommend it if it sounds like your sort of game. If you're looking for like a deep mechanical experience, you're not going to get it from this game. You're going to get a very, very simplified version. But it could be a great game, I think, to introduce people into games, to be honest. It's very low stakes, and I think a lot of people who don't play games would honestly get a lot of like joy and benefit from playing like as a cat. People generally like cats, right? So why not? Anyway, on that note, I'm going to round this episode off here, I think. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons, and I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.